You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, and Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, The Times leads with a plea from the family of fugitive Daniel Khalif to hand himself in. Net zero obsession has fuelled inflation, according to Lord King on the front page of The Telegraph. He says it should not be the Bank of England's job to help the world with climate change. Andrew Flintoff is on the front page of The Sun, pictured for the first time since he was seriously injured in a crash while filming Top Gear. The Mirror leads with tributes paid to Queen Elizabeth II on the first anniversary of her death. They show the Prince and Princess of Wales pausing to remember whilst the King and Queen were in Balmoral. The weekend edition of the Financial Times leads with the continuing scandal surrounding degrading concrete in schools across the country. They say the government ignored warnings about dangerous buildings back in 2020. The Guardian says MPs have told the Prime Minister access to COVID jabs needs to be widened as concerns over the new Pirola variant grow. The Daily Express leads with a new report claiming ministers must stop bowing to human rights rulings made by woke judges which benefit bogus asylum seekers, terrorists and strikers. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined by Susie and Henry. Thank you very much for being here in the flesh, as it were. Let's kick off with a look at the front page of The Times. And this is the family of Daniel Khalif actually, well, putting out a message to him to hand himself in. Susie.
Yep, so this is a close relative. We don't know exactly whom, but it's said that he's a very intelligent, easygoing boy, that he loved army life, but in the past year or so, something seems to have changed. And they're saying that they think that he's very, very frightened, and that's why he's run away. And it hasn't really been reported very much, but when Khalifa was first arrested, after there were some items found in his barracks, he actually wasn't arrested on the spot and straight away. They didn't find him for about 20 days, 3 weeks. He had gone on the run, and that was because he was apparently frightened and they found him later. So if perhaps the same kind of thing has happened, which wouldn't be a massive stretch of the imagination, this isn't, you know, a dreadful mastermind at large in the country. This is someone who's running away because he's frightened of something, or facing the consequences, or facing the court to try him for the alleged offences. And the police are saying they think it's pretty close and they're going to get him soon, kind of thing. But if that was the case, I don't think there'd be a £20,000 reward being put up, and they'd be putting out pictures of the clothes he was wearing a week ago.
The article, Henry, also saying that his family, this close relative, is blaming the British Army for his downfall, but obviously there's no more detail than that.
No, which is strange, because it does say either way that he did love army life, and you know it's hard to see how the army made him start collecting information. The things he's charged with or alleged to have done is, one, collecting information for that would be useful to a foreign power. He worked for the Royal Signals Regiment, which is an intelligence regiment which has access to lots of sensitive material. And I think there was something as well about creating mock bombs and leaving them around the base. Now, I don't think those are something that a mean drill sergeant has got him doing, right? So it's natural for the family to want to try and shift the responsibility for this onto the armed forces, but maybe they'll substantiate that allegation in time. But at the moment, I don't think there's all that much to it.
And the further detail that we read in the article, information from the close relative, saying that the family are secular Iranians opposed to the present regime.
Exactly, and we've all seen sometimes terrorist offences that have led to a terrible number of deaths. Other times, people that are accused of offences of planning things that haven't quite come off. But quite often in those circumstances, without wanting to try to provoke sympathy for the people in question, there is a degree of being absolutely unhinged in it, of being mentally quite unwell. And I would suggest that I've covered those cases where someone who's got very low IQs has been locked up for terror offences, but actually they've just gathered material because they have obsessive personality and things like this. I would suggest if a soldier is only making a mock bomb, then he's probably, generally speaking, they know how to make a proper one. If there are mock ones around the base, that's not good. It's obviously something they need to tackle, but I would suggest there may be something, perhaps the family mean, trying to read into it a bit, that there was a lack of duty of care, perhaps, if he was having any kind of mental health crises, that he wasn't getting the care and help he needed, and something went horribly wrong.
I guess alternatively,
I'm guessing a lot there, obviously.
Practicing,
We don't know.
if you're making a mock bomb, it's hard. It's a high rate. It's a high stakes thing to steal real explosives, right?
Yes.
But so again, they could substantiate it, and it's important not to completely close your mind to it. But there's another perfectly viable explanation, which is simply that you don't want to admit that your son or nephew has done something like this, and therefore you try.
And we don't know because he hasn't been.
He hasn't been
trial,
caught and put on trial.
No. But the new lines, as you say, coming out tonight, that £20,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. And also, we've heard from Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Police Commissioner, saying that officers are now investigating whether the escape was what's been termed an inside job.
Yes, well, there's the idea that you can't possibly get out of a prison unless you have some assistance, and that is a possibility. But from what we've heard about Wandsworth Prison in the years running up to this, not just recently, but certainly since the breakout, it does seem to be quite easy to get in and out of that prison. It's probably slightly easier than getting the local bus, I would have thought. But if you have a prison where guards, for example, either because their families are under pressure and they're scared, or because they're open to corruption, or for any other reason, are allowing drugs and illicit mobile phones and so on to get into that prison, then by default, they're also not going to be doing quite the right checks necessarily when people are coming in and out. So, and I think one of the papers, I can't remember which one we saw it in now, but one of the papers is reporting that a few years ago, someone managed to get out of prison by having an illicit mobile phone, setting up a fake email account and emailing the prison officials with the bail restrictions, and they let him out on that basis.
That really happened?
Yes, I think you should get time off for that because it was an absolute genius move. But
prison guard corruption is a real issue, especially to do with drugs. It's how most drugs get into prisons. So it would be, I suppose, irresponsible for the authorities not to check that. Although in those cases, there's a pretty clear financial motive, whereas I don't know what the motive would be for helping this young man escape. So.
Yeah, it's all speculation at this point. The investigation continues. The Mirror really putting out this line from the police directly to Daniel Khalif that they're closing in on him. Wherever he is, if he sees this, might this sway him to hand himself in, or do you think that this?
I don't know. I think if you are on the run, you're not popping into the newsagents to buy a copy of the paper, whichever one he may choose to read. Of course, he should read the Mirror, but I don't think it's going to necessarily. I mean, if you're on the run and they can't find you, they're not. If they are close to finding you, they're not giving press statements like this.
He might have access to media.
I'll tell you, can he claim the £20,000 reward?
They've
put out a £20,000 reward for information. Could he claim it? If he thinks he's going to get caught anyway, turn himself in, gets put in a trust account until he gets let out.
I think that's quite a twisted question that we know we know the answer to. But just a bit more on the profile in the Mirror, giving us a little bit more of an insight into the character. They're saying that he dreamed of using his skills to join the SAS. So someone that seemingly was happy in terms of his military life.
Yeah, and he was operating in Signals, which already is a part of the army that deals with picking up electronic communications and providing electronic communications quite often on deployment with members of the Special Forces and supporting them in what they do. And he's a young lad and he was ambitious, and it does seem to be that he had dreams and hopes for the future. Obviously, something has derailed that somehow.
Yeah, we shall find out, hopefully. Let's have a look at the FT weekend and this story about ministers ignoring advice regarding RAAC, the crumbling concrete. Take us into this, Henry.
Right, so a few years ago, there was a panel drawing up a list of high-risk buildings, and the official organisation of engineers recommended that any buildings with RAAC be surveyed and then put on this list. And ministers, it doesn't say why in the article, but we can speculate, ministers decided not to do this, which means that now that this scandal has hit, there is not a comprehensive database or list anywhere of what buildings have this material in it. Now, that causes a huge amount of distress for people because obviously you know, it is maybe only going to be a couple of hundred schools or even fewer, but if you think it's every school, that's going to worry a lot of parents. But it also means that we don't know the scale of the problem in hospitals, in courtrooms, and in other parts of the public sector estate. So ministers, I think, are going to be under pressure to explain why they made this decision not to get out ahead of this a few years ago.
OK, just to bring in another story, because we're running out of time, Susie, I wonder if you can take us to the Guardian and this story about MPs advising Rishi Sunak on widening access to COVID jabs, to new COVID jabs.
Yep, so it was decided this year not to bother rolling COVID jabs out for anyone who is under 65. And, of course, that includes some people in younger age groups, but who have underlying health conditions that would technically put them in the same category as an over 65 because of their illnesses or chronic health conditions. And they decided not to do it. Fundamentally, I mean, you could speculate as to whether or not it's to do with the cost or the expense or whether they've got enough of them. But mainly it was because last year they realised when they were rolling these out, there wasn't a very high enough take-up of them amongst the general public. Most people felt the pandemic was over, they didn't need to panic or worry anymore, and therefore fewer and fewer people were getting the vaccines. Now we have a new variant, and it seems to have more mutations and we have less protection than before. Not quite sure what impact, if any, it's going to have. And they're saying, well, actually, you do need now to widen this out to more people. I am only in my 40s, but I'm in the over 50 group because I have epilepsy. And if they were providing it to the over 50s, I would therefore qualify and I would be protecting my older parents, my younger daughter. There are many people who have underlying health conditions or who have caring responsibilities, reasons that they want to have the vaccine. And of course, you can't do as you can with a flu jab, go to the pharmacy and get one for yourself privately. Yeah. You're reliant on the government saying you can protect yourself and protect
And that's something they also want to do with that, to give private access to the jab as well. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. It's OK, you can talk amongst yourselves. That's what you're here for. I love the way she nudged in. Oh, we're on. With me, as you can see, the Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, and the Daily Mirror columnist, Susie Boniface. Welcome back to you, both of you. Right, let's have a look at the Telegraph front page and this story about Jeremy Hunt considering announcing a real terms benefit cut this autumn amid hopes the funds could be used for a tax giveaway next year before the general election. Henry.
I mean, so obviously everyone's struggling with the cost of living crisis, and the government has for the past year been making a big deal of how it's been helping everyone with the cost of living crisis. And now, ahead of the general election, it's proposing that benefits should not keep up with inflation. Now, this is going to be particularly difficult, I think, for the government to justify because of the pensions triple lock. So you're going to, at one end of this scale, you're going to have this nation's wealthiest age cohort, many of whom have property wealth and everything else, getting an 8% increase. And then you're going to have people on benefits receiving less than inflation. Now, it might be that frees up some money for tax cuts, and the government will target those in the election. But it creates an absolutely very tricky narrative. And I suspect what actually this might be about is Labour will pledge to reverse this, presumably, if they come into office. And that means that the Tories can attack them on spending. But it's a very strange decision, I think.
Well, one of the biggest welfare benefits, of course, is pensions, which they promised to protect. So it doesn't really make any sense. But you could rewrite that whole headline, just say, Sheriff of Nottingham heads for village with matches, because that's what's happening.
Summed up very succinctly.
Nothing new under the sun.
Did he burn villages down? It doesn't sound good for the tax base.
Well, he hits it with his matches if you pay the taxes, or else it's, you know.
OK. Yeah, fair.
Right, we've just got time to have a look at this story. It's only a tiny paragraph on the front of the FT, but this is a rebuild, a rebrand of Oxford Street, Henry?
So, yeah, absolutely. Oxford Street, theoretically London's premier shopping district. For a while, it has been widely seen to be in steep decline. And so now there is apparently a concerted push by the various owners of the buildings and businesses there to try and revive it. But strangely, given that it was meant to be a destination shopping thing, they've got an IKEA. It's a strange place to have an IKEA, I think. You're carrying all the furniture home. And they're also going to have a crazy golf, like the world's largest crazy golf. Like, it's not really reviving it as a flagship shopping destination. I think they're just trying to get rid of the sweet shops and the money laundering fronts, which would at least be progress. But
and HMV, which I don't think it's going to be for a great minute, but having a big indoor miniature thing and crazy golf, it's just inviting teenagers to carry on hanging about and all the rest of it. And like I say, with an IKEA, I mean, how are you going to get the wardrobe home? on the
Definitely
tube.
no choice.
It doesn't make any
And you
sense
contrast it with,
whatsoever.
Regent Street's right next to it. That is a premier shopping district. That presumably is what the model you would be looking for if you were trying to revive Oxford Street. And it sounds like they've kind of given up on it as a retail destination, and they're just trying to find a slightly better use for those shops than selling
but you
mobile
should
phones and
make it-
overpriced American
Make it a
candy.
tourist destination, which it isn't at the moment. There are many cities around the world and in Europe where there are streets where you just have to go because it is the thing. And yet they're still attractive and there is something there for you. And there is nothing there. If you come to Oxford Street in London, it's... watch out for the machetes. It's not a
dear.
place
I don't
that
think
you
it's
want
quite that bad.
to go as a
I
tourist
don't think it's quite
destination,
bad.
is it?
And I think tourists do still head to Oxford Street. But,
Yeah,
we'll
but they
wait to
get
see.
disappointed once they're there. That's the problem.
Susie and Henry, thank you very much.